the mind must have a meditation object. Try to practice. When the mind has no meditation object, it will wander aimlessly, drifting away for long periods. Find a home for the mind and give it a meditation object to settle it. Luangpu also taught this, saying, to have an object of awareness for the mind and an object of recollection is necessary for mindfulness to arise. So, let us provide the mind with a meditation object. The mind can stay with the recitation of Buddho or stay with the breath, or anything you're comfortable with. Whether staying with observing the rising and falling of the abdomen, moving the hands as taught by Luangpu Tian, reciting Buddho, or chanting Na Ma Pa Ta. Any of these work as long as it feels right for you. Find a meditation practice to engage in. This is the time for practice. It is not the time for someone who has already finished their task. For example, stay with the recitation of Buddho while keeping awareness of your own mind. Continuously recite Buddho, Buddho. If the mind slips away to think of something else and forgets Buddho, you will quickly recognize it slipped away. If we don't have a meditation object, when the mind gets lost in thought, it will wander for a long time, sometimes even for days. For instance, Buddho is itself a thought. If we are thinking Buddho, Buddho, and the mind gets lost in other thoughts, it will stop thinking Buddho. However, if we train the mind until it becomes accustomed to reciting Buddho, it will not wander off for long. If you don't like reciting, you can use something else. Any meditation object will do, except for kasina meditation. Kasina meditation is not recommended because it often causes the mind to move outward. For example, if we sit and look at an image of the Buddha, or light a candle and look at the flame, the mind becomes fixated on the image of the Buddha or the flame. When we later try to shift back to vipassana, insight meditation, it becomes difficult because the mind has moved outward. Try to keep the mind upright and stable within the body. For instance, continuously recite Buddho, Buddho. When the mind is restless, recite Buddho more quickly. When the mind is calm, recite it more slowly. Give the mind a meditation object for the mind to stay with, but don't force it to stay with the object all the time. It is merely a tool to observe the mind. For example, as we recite Buddho, if the mind wanders off to think about something else, don't scold it. Let it think, but quickly notice that the mind is drifted into thought. When thinking arises, the mind moves to think. It flows into thought. Can you notice this? When we think, the mind moves toward thinking. Similarly, when you are aware of the breath, the mind moves towards the breath. The mind naturally tends to move. The key is to be aware of the mind. We may engage in any meditation practice, but the main task is to know the mind itself. As we recite Buddho, Buddho, if the mind starts wandering into other thoughts, know that it has drifted away. Or, as we observe the breath, breathing in and out, if the mind drifts into thought, know that it has drifted into thinking. If the mind shifts to fixate on the breath, or becomes absorbed in it, know that the mind has moved to the breath. When observing the rising and falling of the abdomen, some people enjoy this practice, and that's perfectly fine. However, it's important to notice this change. For instance, as we observe the abdomen rising and falling, if the mind wanders off into thought, know so. If the mind becomes fixated on the abdomen, we should also know so. Most practitioners tend to have their minds flow toward the meditation object without noticing that shift. That is precisely what makes the practice ineffective. The minds of humans, and indeed all beings, tend to forget itself all day long. The mind lacks concentration. It is not upright and does not remain grounded within itself. Concentration is important, but the concentration that we will use for practice is the concentration where the mind is upright and grounded within the body. Most people's minds tend to wander off in thought. They are not with the body. Practitioners often let their minds drift toward the meditation object. For example, when reciting Buddho, the mind fixes on the word Buddho. When observing the breath, the mind clings to the breath. Watching the rising and falling of the abdomen, the mind attaches itself to the abdomen. During walking meditation, the mind stays with the feet. This approach is incorrect. It shows a lack of understanding in the practice. In practice, one must capture the ringleader, which is the mind. The mind is the master of all Dhamma. Gaining mastery over the mind is to gain the Dhamma. But if you lose the mind, you lose the Dhamma entirely. So, we use a meditation object to anchor the mind so we can be aware of it, not to force the mind to remain still. We do not control the mind to make it still. The mind moves and shifts, and we simply observe it and be aware of it. Do not try to make the mind stop moving. Doing so would be another mistake. See, the mind moves. As you practice, keep observing. When the mind moves, know so. Do not forbid it from moving. If you try to stop it from moving, the mind will become tight. If our mind feels tight or constrained, it is a sign that we are controlling the mind. Who here notices their mind feeling tight? Raise your hands. These are the ones who like to control the mind. For those who notice the mind moving and shifting, just observe it. Simply be aware of the mind as it moves. Don't force it to be still. There's no such thing as a free skill. Skills take practice. If you want to excel and master at a skill, you must practice. Engage in a practice. The aim is not to make the mind still, but to be aware of the mind as it moves and shifts. The moment you become aware that the mind has moved, a stable and upright mind will arise naturally. Because a mind that moves is a restless mind. It is a mind filled with delusion, moha, and agitation, uddaka. Restlessness is its nature. The moment we have mindfulness, sati, and we are aware that the mind has moved, defilements will cease immediately. This is because defilements and mindfulness cannot arise simultaneously. So, we practice a form of meditation that when the mind moves, we become aware that the mind has moved. The mind will stop moving on its own without intention. It will naturally become stable and upright without becoming tight. But if we practice, and when the mind moves, we try to pull it back as soon as we notice it has moved, the mind will become tight. This is incorrect. When the mind moves, keep knowing it continuously. Over time, from having no moral precepts, you will naturally develop them. Those who break moral precepts do so because their minds are moved by the power of defilements. They are overwhelmed by these defilements and thus fail to see them.